Let's begin with to all the panelists. We'll start with Mark Schwartz.
What do you see? This question's for all the panelists, though. What do you see as the most pressing economic challenge facing Arlington right now? And what gives you hope as
So thank you, Devanshi, and I'm happy to be here and glad to be sitting here with people who are a lot smarter than me. The biggest challenge we face right now are things that I think are out of our control. Usually, when we're talking about economic conditions, there's something that we can do to sort of address things. So I'm concerned that there are issues that are much bigger than us, and so with that comes a feeling of, you know, how we're ever going to be able to handle that. So that gives me anxiety and not a lot of clever answers. And was there another part to your question? Oh, guess what gives me hope? Well, having said that, I think we can't lose sight of the fact that if we lost, let's say X%, 15% of what we had right now, what we have is great. And if we had 85% of that, we're still far ahead of where a lot of other places are going to be. So I think that we should be really concerned, and these are really important questions, but we can't lose sight of some of the great stuff that we have. It is not all going to go away regardless of what happens. And we should view that as a source of strength and success. And, you know, one of the things I've said to staff all along is I don't want them to be doom scrolling. You know what that means, Devanshi, you're not too old to know that. But constantly focusing on the negative. We have to focus on the strength that we have, because from that, hopefully we can, you know, use that to push ahead.
Thank you. For me, coming from a nonprofit perspective, I would say squarely it's the convergence of escalating and heightened housing insecurity coupled with the strain on the safety net sector. And so what does that mean? And how does that translate for nonprofits? Well, we have families and individuals who are depressed, depraved, deprived. They are in need of hope and help and healing. And when they come to us, they are looking for a resource. And amid their search, the nonprofit, like me and all other partners in the community, we are faced with local budget constraints. And it is really going to be a challenge for us, but I am hopeful about one thing I was sharing with our guest panelist here, my colleague, that the trend that we're seeing among the nonprofit community is forcing us in our resilience to be more collaborative. And that's what gives me hope. Historically, nonprofits would compete. We'd compete for awards, compete for money and grants and power and prestige and visibility and brand awareness. But now, instead of competing, we have to complete. And we complete each other through our missions and values and vision and thought partnership. And I do believe that that's going to be a trend in ensuring that we're more collaborative to ensure our success and resilience on the social sector front.
Thank you for the chance to be with you. At this moment today, the issues that worry me the most are the increase in unemployment that we have seen from last year. I think it's right, 3.2 or in that range %. But I did look, and 1,053 Arlingtonians are unemployed right now. And, you know, Mario Cuomo, long before, you know, even before doom scrolling, talked about a job is hope. It's not just an income, it's hope. And so, you know, at this moment, helping those individuals is the biggest concern. That's not to discount in our budget process. I voted to advertise a real estate tax increase. We didn't end up doing it because I was worried about the 20 to 25,000 Arlingtonians who are those that Barfonce referred to that earn less than $50,000 for a household income. That is something I'm still and always worried about, but at this moment, it's the unemployed I'm worried about. Fast forward to September 30th of this year, I will be worried about what federal budget cuts the folks that I don't agree with are going to come up. We have 80 million in federal funding that we receive in Arlington, and that could be a huge challenge. So that's a lot of things that worry me. What gives me hope is we have our federal employees who are many at risk and some of those who are unemployed. They are talented. We are educated. They're committed to community and public service. And we are still Arlington. We are going to meet this moment because of the community that we have been and are, and because I do believe this can be our finest moment. And I'm confident because the people I get to work for and you all are outstanding people with outstanding talent. And we're going to translate and find a way to accentuate the good. And so that gives me lots of hope.
Let me start by saying, remind you that I'm, for lack of a better term, an economist. An economist, you know, in economics is the dismal science. So there are some harsh realities that we're facing. We have not in modern history experienced what is about to befall us in terms of it. And unless everybody in the White House and everybody changes their mind about what they're going to do, we haven't. There are no models that tell us what do you do when it's the federal government that is the industry that is driving the disruption. So we are going to be in for pain for a while. I don't know how long that lasts, and we'll get, and I'll just, you know, dwell on the pain part for just a moment. We are talking about whether it is through the cutbacks of DOJ's budget cuts or whether it is through agency relocations. We are facing in this region losing 120,000 direct federal jobs if they do what they say they're going to do. Each one of those jobs, you get another 0.4 jobs just from their household spending. But we also know that that's going to affect contracting because if a worker's not there, they don't need a building to operate in. They don't need office supplies. They don't need janitorial services. All of it flows through. So we could be talking about, in terms of very easily, 250,000 jobs out of this region. And it's not losing those jobs. It's the biggest problem. That's a big problem. It's how fast it's going to happen because they're going to be driven to do as much of this before the midterm elections as they can. So we have a shock of an order that what Midwestern cities used to see in the 1970s when the big plant would shut down. Our company town is going to be smaller than what it was. And we can get into other questions about some of the details about that. What I can tell you provides the hope is that we have the core components of what is going to be the driving forces of the 21st century economy. But we also have to recognize that that driving force is not necessarily going to be driven by federal employment. And therefore, we need to be thinking of how we do things just differently and keeping in mind, and okay, I come from Texas, but I've been here for 10 years, so I'm getting there. I'm not native yet, but I'm getting there. But let's just keep in mind that for many years, decades, people that were doing what Ryan does now, and unfortunately he's too young to have gotten the benefits of this, was in many cases, what did they have to do to get businesses to come here? Well, build the office building so they had a place to occupy because government kept expanding, expending, and so businesses were coming here to do business with their biggest customer. The people, the businesses that we need to attract now don't have to be here. We are going to be in direct competition with Charlotte, Charleston, Nashville, Dallas, Orlando, Phoenix, you just keep on and on. And that means that we got to think of things just a little bit different than we do now. And we have to let our local leaders know that we'll support them when they're making some basically some hard choices about the way we have done things in the past. Because if we keep tossing them out the window, then we won't get the changes done.
So Terry and I usually are together, and he usually does what he just does, and then I'm gonna switch and tell you why I'm optimistic about things and that we're doing programs and helping the economy grow and all that. So just that's gonna be the back and forth all night. So I'm not gonna repeat what was just said. I'll associate with all the comments about kind of our current economic state and where it's going in the next, 12 to 18 months. There is a ripple effect that hasn't been mentioned, which is our tourism economy is already starting to contract. We're concerned about what's going to happen to our small businesses here locally who are going to be pinched by everything from tariffs to continued increased costs to just a lack of consumer spending in our community potentially. So at Arlington Economic Development, we're a full service economic development agency. So we don't just attract the Amazons that come here. We work with small businesses, our hotels. We work in real estate development. We work in arts and cultural with arts and cultural organizations. So we kind of go the full gamut. And so we are continuing to push forward with our strategic plan, which we released last year and is available on our website, which takes into account, I think, some of these issues that we're going to be facing, because it's not a plan that revolves around the federal government continuing to spend, which is what you just heard Terry say that we've kind of benefited from. So over the course of the next couple of years, as we implement that, we're hopeful that will help offset, not totally reverse, but offset some of the impacts that we might feel from the federal government reducing in size and footprint and employment and spending. What gives me hope and is that we have a very robust set of partners and organizations, not just here in Arlington, but in Northern Virginia and across the Commonwealth. We're not the best state for business for no reason. It's because we do economic development really well. And so that, coupled with things like our higher education institutions, the assets that we have here in our community that go beyond the federal government, the corporations that are located here, I think that gives us, as Mark was saying, that doesn't we're not going to go back to zero. We have to lean on those assets. And so what I hope happens over the course of conversations like this in the next couple of months is that we all start to think a little bit more creatively about how we can address these challenges, because we're going to need to start doing some things differently. And that can be uncomfortable at times, but it's going to be necessary, because falling back on our current positions not going to be the way we help get out of this situation.
I want to turn, because Barfonce actually talked about economic pressures and where it hits in terms of housing and affordability. Barfonce, what are you seeing on the front lines? Oh, okay. So only
Yeah.
I can work at a time.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Did you hear okay. And hold the microphone close for Daniel.
So the question was about.
I don't think you're on that.
No.
Okay, so there we are. So what am I seeing in terms of economic instability and housing? Security, yeah. It's like the chicken or the egg. I don't know which comes first, but I will say that economic instability leads to housing insecurity and vice versa, right? And so I think that we're seeing on the nonprofit sector, that front, we're seeing both, and we're seeing them both at the same time. And the result of that is the widening gap between those who are just surviving and those that are thriving. And so what does that mean for partnerships like workforce development and economic development office? I think that there is a great opportunity for nonprofits to work with public-private partnerships to not only close the gap that we're seeing, but to ensure that housing insecurity is not only made evident, which we all know, but that we're working vigorously to eradicate that problem while shaping the economic security of those that we serve. Bottom line is this: if a person lacks economic stability, then they can't properly pay their rent, afford a home or safe housing for them and their families. We're also talking childcare provision, transportation. So the list goes on and on and on. And I say often to my colleagues, a key is the key. A key to a home provides the stability and the safety that families need to move forward and push forward in their journey. Oh, okay.
What is the county's approach to protecting affordability as Arlington grows?
Well, we've had a number of tools that we've been using to increase affordability. Frankly, the most effective one we have is something that we do that no other jurisdiction in the area does, which is we have a housing grant program that actually provides cash in hand to people who qualify, based on area median income requirements, to give them the money they need to actually afford to live in what are, already subsidized units. So that's been a tool, and we have stayed with that tool. Actually, in the budget that was just adopted, we increased it, and we're relying on an ongoing stream of funding as opposed to money that comes on a one-time nature. So that has been one of the biggest tools we've used. We also have a history of working with our nonprofit partners. There are a couple that are really active in Arlington and building that infrastructure that we need. So I wish there were, given the times we're facing now, it's sort of like another extra tool that all of a sudden appeared that would make it easier. I just don't think there is, which gets a little bit into the pressure. We're going to be in a situation where I think we're going to need to be doing more of that. And the question is, where will we get the resources to do it? So nothing earth-shattering in what I just said. But being steadfast and focused on that, especially when economic conditions get difficult, it is harder to maintain your commitment to that. And the problem gets even worse regardless of how much more we commit to it. So yeah, I'm going to stop there because I might start crying.
Hearing what Mark just said, can get harder. Resources in the face of. And what's next?
Let's see if this works. Not an easy question. I'm very glad Mark focused on the housing grant program. It touches on those most in need in our community. Our budget has to acknowledge, Terry mentioned 120,000 jobs at risk in Arlington. That's at least 24,000 federal jobs, federal employees. And we're working on it. We're going to have a forum next Monday on this. We have to honor the American dream to the best extent we can with those employees, but we also have another 20 to 25,000 Arlingtonians whose income is less than $50,000 a year. So when it gets hard, we on the board and the county manager, we have to stay committed to what we can afford to do, thinking about those most in need first. And I believe that our public servants are suffering. And I texted with one yesterday. He said, I got a new job, it's more secure, but I'm watching them dismantle what I believe in. And so, I think that I know he is also committed to equity and he owns a home, but I know he would say, that he's not first in need. He has kids, he has to pay his mortgage, so we have to keep focused on the things, on equity in those most in need, while also recognizing that we have to manage our economy. Part of the reason I did not support, and we made some cuts to not have a real estate tax increase, is because those federal employees who have mortgages are going to be struggling. And I know another who's moving to New Mexico, right? So this is real. I just think, we have to manage being aware of our entire economy, and then economic growth has to be structured to benefit all of us. And then our investments have to be tailored those most in need, while keeping in mind that we have to make strategic investments. I do not apologize for a second for focusing on getting CoStar to come here. That is our next economic victory after Amazon. And both of those, the evidence on those is overwhelming that they've been excellent choices. Our partnership agreement, it's this year with Amazon that we first are doing any incentive. And they've given us, in addition to our ordinances, over 280 million in affordable housing. So we have to manage those sort of competing interests wisely. And I'm confident that we can.
So Daniel has asked that we use one mic since it's kind of going in and out, so you're going to see me now do this. This question is for Ryan. Ryan, we heard Terry say the workforce is changing, right? We're talking about remote work. How is Arlington adjusting its economic strategy to prepare for the shifts in the workforce?
Thanks. So we've done a couple of things. First is when we think about growing, attracting jobs or helping businesses expand, we start by looking at target industries that make sense for our region, right? So like, we're not going to have an auto plant come to Arlington, right? So we don't go out and try to attract Ford to come here. So we look at what are called knowledge work industries. So things like technology, when you get into that, now it's getting into quantum computing, AI, things of that nature. And so that's the baseline for what we do. We try to figure out what industries work for Arlington, what companies within those industries are growing and would consider relocation here, or if they're here, expand here. And any economic development deal that we play a part in, we are able to get the company to pay what we call a prevailing wage. So that's a wage they have to pay the average of that. And in Arlington, that's a pretty significant wage. It's in like the 80,000s. And that's just on average. And so like in the case of CoStar and Amazon, they in most cases are paying more than the prevailing wage. So an economic development project actually helps to create jobs that pay above what a non-economic development project would bring. And so what does that mean then for kind of the workforce in general? Well, that provides economic mobility. So we know we don't have everyone who works in Arlington at the highest income level. And so what we're trying to do is create those opportunities for people to move up the economic ladder. And we've done that by attracting companies. We've also in the past have run workforce programs where we've helped at the apprenticeship level by helping people get into the workforce, in this case in technology positions, at the bottom of the ladder, right? To get them into the workforce and get them into a position that can help them grow. And in a couple of cases, we had folks who were working, as Uber drivers, and they were stocking shelves at Whole Foods. And by them being able to get into our apprenticeship program in a software development role, we're able to move up that economic ladder. So that's what we're doing in terms of kind of trying to provide opportunities for people. It is a changing landscape, and that's the one thing that we're always trying to be cognizant of. I mean, we know that also remote work, for example, has been a very significant factor in people's decision on where they want to live, right? Now they're not going because the job's there, they're going because they want to live there. And then they find the job either there or they find a remote job. So we, by having this great community in a region that I think is really got a lot of assets, are able to also play on that piece of the puzzle, right? Come live here because you can have that great community. Your kids can go to great schools. So that's what we're trying to market as well in addition. So it's a little bit of both. It's the business side and the worker side, but we're trying to take it from every angle. Hopefully that answered the question.
Thank you. Terry, what additional trends are you seeing in the regional labor markets that we should be preparing for, including, but especially for workers without traditional credentials?
So what is this, one question in 72 parts? These are, it is complex, but we have multiple factors that are hitting us kind of all at the same time. And some is, the displaced federal workers, we are already starting to lose some of those families, even if the other partner has a job, just because the housing market's still strong. You can sell up, realize it, and go someplace that's a less costly environment, whatever. We're going to have to double down, and I say that, and I mean it quite literally, in addressing the issue of the workforce who's not as mobile are some of the ones that are not as well off. They don't have the resources to move, to spend $5,000 moving. So in some respects, and I don't mean this in a mean fashion, but they're stuck here. So let's get them trained up for the emerging jobs and what's coming on. But keeping in mind, while this is going on, we have the AI revolution happening at the same time. Large language models for a number of years now have actually been quite good at doing things like rules-based decision-making. If this, then this. Well, you think about how much of the administrative workforce of the federal government basically go to their office every day and do rules-based decision-making. So in some respects, you had, one of the things that's interesting is we're doing all this in the immediate thing. You kind of wonder a more sane way would have been to have attrition out some of these federal workers, and it wouldn't have been so fast. But my point is there are emerging opportunities that we can address. It is AI. I don't know what the business application of quantum is going to be, but it will come, and it is coming, and we are already well regarded in that field. We have the International Congress about that occurs here. The other piece that I think is quite interesting kind of gets at the two pieces that happened over here. Remember, you're in a big labor shed. Every person in Arlington who needs that job in the mid-range doesn't need to have the job in Arlington. When I got here 10 years ago, I was told, don't think about manufacturing. We can't do manufacturing in this region because of land costs and all that. And I'm sitting there, and I just arrived about the time that the chip plant, Micron, had announced a $3 billion expansion. And I'm thinking to myself, what do you mean we can't do manufacturing, right? What is manufacturing in the modern environment? It's 3D printing, it's additive. It doesn't require 100,000 square foot facility to produce things. So the idea is we have infrastructure. Imagine it's not a bad commute to start your morning in Arlington and go to Fairfax if you need to. Now, you're held to pay if you're going the other direction, right? But, so the thing is, as a region, we have opportunity to see this, and we need to make sure that young folks are having some opportunities. We're going to have to retrain some workers. We're going to have to do a lot of different things to make it happen. But we have the industries that we can grow in, and what we want them to be is very high value added manufacturing, because we are an expensive place. We don't want to be a cheap place to live. So this is an opportunity that we have, and this is why the alliance that Arlington and the other Nova, and quite honestly, it needs to be the district and even those people on the north side of the Potomac, whatever they are, they're crazy enough, right? But we need to be working regionally to be identifying these opportunities for teaching kids. I'll give you an example. The International Brotherhood of Electric Workers runs an apprenticeship program designed for people to work in data centers. That occupation has grown more in this region than any other place in the country, largely off the expansion of data centers in Prince William and Loudoun. So you go into this program, no high school diploma required. Well, they do want that, but you don't have to have associate's degrees or anything. You work as an apprentice. You get paid for work. You work 4 days a week. The 5th day you attend classes at Nova Community College. 4 years later, you get a job. You're certified electrician. Your starting wage, salary and benefits combined is $87 an hour. Now to do your math, that's about $170,000 a year. So you take a young mother from a disadvantaged background, because there is nothing in being an electrician that requires heavy duty work. It's dexterity that matters. And you put her in a position to where her first real job earns enough to even be able to buy a house in this region. So, yeah.
I just, yeah, I want to high five you, give you a hug, do all that sort of jazz. I mean, what you are saying is so spot on, and we're finding that this is real time stuff that we're talking about here. What we're doing in the nonprofit sector is upskilling employment. You know, if they are underemployed or whatever they need to do to gain that certification, to become more facile and adaptive and agile in this technology industry. It's something that we need to do, and we are very committed to doing just that. The certification program, whether it be electrician, plumbing, HVAC, technology. There are so many opportunities out there, and we would like to continue our partnerships with corporations who are our partners, financial partners, but now let's go deeper and let's see if we can create these vertical partnerships, not just with your financial gift, although it's greatly appreciated, but with your time, your talent, your resources, your effort. And those resources include hiring decisions where you take a homestretch mom who is fleeing a domestic violence issue. She finds stability in housing that gives her that key. But while she's there, she is upskilling her employment with my partner right over here. And then she's able to care for her children, make more money, go into her journey of transformation and thrive. So I just want to applaud you for saying that. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I
Go
won't.
ahead, brother.
I can't top what was said, but I also coming back to the question, right? You know, I'm pro-labor, and I think there's a way to be pro-business and pro-labor. And I think we need to say that again and again. And IBEW is a great partner. And, you know, frankly, prevailing wage was not always an easy thing to get done in Virginia. Yeah. And we had to stand up and say, let's do it. And, you know, logistically, it was a new thing for every locality in Virginia, and Arlington was first to say it's time. But we also have to acknowledge, and Ryan got to the concepts, but we've done I think two forums so far. We got a third scheduled for May 28th, if I remember, that are trying to meet federal workers where they are, because not all federal workers necessarily will have the American dream story, that particular American dream story that Homestretch and IBEW just referred to. 24,000 Arlingtonians. We need to do data analysis as to their ages. It's a different thing if you're retired, if you're at 60 and you're fired illegally or whatever, or RIFT, whatever you call it. We have to think about how we help them. And we have to be honest that we're at the start of this journey. COVID was an economic nightmare like that. This is a slow-moving economic multiplier catastrophe that we have to gird ourselves for the long, grueling road that we're on. But I'm not here to just be depressing, because I know we can figure it out, because everyone is so talented. There are federal workers who are starting their own business, former federal workers starting their own business, and they have skills, some of which AI will address, but also some of the quantitative skills and the analytic skills are going to put us in good stead. I just think it's important for us also to be honest that on the federal worker side, it is moving so quickly that we're in the process of developing the responses so that we mitigate some of the economic multiplier challenges that Terry mentioned. There's not going to be one specific solution, but if we keep the spirit, the sense of humor that the Texan has, and the spirit of energy that Homestretch has, we can reach these 24,000 people because they want to be reached. My parents were federal employees. They want to be part of the solution. And so with that energy, we can do great things. It's just, we have work to do to get to the specifics of how to do it, I think.
So Mark, Matt touched upon COVID, and I think that brings up the issue of resilience. So what does a resilient local economy look like? How do we build it if we do not have it already?
So, based in the conversation we just had, so I think you have to take a longer view on this, which is, and Terry can speak to this much more effectively than I can. We were always a one company town for many years. One of the things I think that was really smart about what the community did and the county board did was bringing Amazon here and bringing some of our other partners that are in the business world. We're not as much a one company town. So we've become more resilient over time. We were forced into it by the base realignment and closure process, by some other events. And I think that shock we're going through right now will be a further infusion of resilience. So I'm not trying to be a smart ass, but I'm going to tell you that what we're going through right now will inevitably create additional resilience on our part, because we'll have to recreate and reinvent ourselves. Now, you heard some examples about what we're going to do. But since you didn't ask this question, I'm gonna, in order to be resilient, you still need to get through the pain of what you're doing. And so I'm going to answer a question you didn't ask. For us to get through that, I honestly do feel that we have to have more come to Arlington from Richmond. Okay, and I will say this, we are a commonwealth. And if you look up the history of what that term means, we're supposed to be working together and supporting each other. Terry will have better numbers on this. Ryan and I were talking about it earlier today. I think about somewhere between 40 and 50% of all the Commonwealth's revenue comes from Northern Virginia. We're going through a spot for the next couple of years as we struggle and reinvent ourselves, where it's not only fair, but I think it's absolutely necessary that stream flow in the other direction from Richmond and the other parts of Virginia, not just because we need it, but because we are the engine that has powered the rest of the Commonwealth. And I know that's hard. If I was sitting in Nelson County or Appomattox County and I said that, they all look at me, I think, saying, what are you talking about? But I think that that's an informational issue. And I think what we really have to look to our representatives in the House and Senate, and hopefully, I'm not sure this governor's done it, maybe the next governor, to say, we're going to get you over this rough patch so that that resilience will be built in. I think that is a big element that's missing. And I know we have all talked about it in various times. Right now, Arlington is the only game in town when it comes to government, your local government. It shouldn't be that way. The state should be with us at least. And I think they're missing in action at this moment. But you asked how we could build the resilience. We need that help from them. So at least I got that off of my chest, even though you didn't ask.
Yes, Terry, yeah. So, and also Terry, when you're kind of responding to that, can you also maybe talk about what indicators are flying under the radar that maybe we need to be thinking about as well?
So there's a couple of things in that, Mark, you're absolutely correct. And unfortunately, just a political thing, and I'm not tossing out bombs for people, but at the end of the legislative session that was extended because of all the back and forth with the budget, you had state legislators, when it was being talked about, we need programming, we need things to happen about what we're going to do with displaced federal workers. We had one element of state government saying, oh, well, there's not going to be any problem. Those people don't mind taking a job at Chick-fil-A in Southwest. Not saying that literally, but the other piece is we had several. I said, well, why should we bother with that? Why should we be spending any state money on that? Because they're Northern Virginia, they're rich. That is literally some of the narrative that's going on. And now one writer, Cardinal News, a guy named Yancey, has actually been writing about this, that no, don't misunderstand South Side, Southwest. If if, it's that whole thing, if Northern Virginia catches, gets sick, the rest of you are getting sick too, and so it's gonna be a real challenge, I think, changing some of that narrative about where the flow of funds go. There's another element too. We talked about housing a lot on this, and I just have to remember, because there's a friend and colleague in the back here who runs the local food bank and understands some of the magnitude that we're facing there. The United Way of the National Capital Region has instituted an emergency plan because they are expecting in the first wave 50,000 more people in this region to be accessing food bank services. That is giving you a sense of the order of magnitude that they're expecting this to hit. So we have to, this is going to be doing a lot. It's going to really hurt in the nonprofits because we have to think about where does our giving go? Does it go to our favorite thing, or maybe goes to an agency that's providing direct support for households in need? There's many different things. In terms of the data, one of our key challenges is now the data is way behind anything we need. There's always a lag about regional data versus national data. But the other thing is just little things like if a federal worker gets laid off, they don't show up in the same data system as regular unemployment. They're in a complete different system, their own system. And so you track that. What you have to do is if you're living in Arlington and you work, say, for the State Department and you lose your job, you have to go into the district to file for unemployment claim. Then the district turns around and has to make a claim for those funds, not to the federal government as a whole, but to each individual agency. And then you have the whole thing that, remember when we did the firings of probation where it was all for cause? Well, then technically they don't qualify for unemployment insurance, but they do have the right to appeal that. So imagine 50,000 people appealing a decision. Keeping in mind that during COVID, we had all the appeals about the systems on the unemployment. And I may be wrong about this by a month or two, but I think that we finally cleared the backlog in the state unemployment data from COVID last fall. So, you think about these structures and how we're going to have to just do more and better, but we don't have the data that are telling us this. The unemployment data is not telling us this. If I look at the housing data, it's not really showing up much yet. We're seeing some little indications. There's more houses on the market, but we kind of expected that anyhow this year. So we're seeing that a little bit. We're not seeing a big uptick in sales. Fortunately, we're not seeing a collapse in housing values. But we are seeing the collapse where you guys are having the challenge about something that was already kind of flat was the commercial property tax base, and that's about to get hammered. But what we're trying, and to let you know, I'm not alone in this. Alex Orfinger from the Washington Business Journal brought a group of us together, myself, folks from UVA, Virginia Tech, Brookings Institution, Urban Institute. We're all working together on coming up with that common set of measures that we do have of what we can do to provide information that will say be published on the COG site just as the neutral third party, if you will, and try to provide the best information. What I can tell you now is I know for certain it's going to get ugly, but I can't tell you how, because I can't even tell you based on the data from OPM, we can't even say who exactly has lost their job so far.
So, sorry, Brian, I just wanted to jump in because you mentioned the food bank. Charlie Mang is in the back. AFAC is our food bank. And he shared a memo, 4,000 families are going to AFAC. And he said to me 15 minutes ago, 20 minutes ago, I never thought I'd see 4,000. And think about how grumpy you can be being hungry once. We got a big challenge. That's one thought. Another thought, for addressing our economic, the localities have to be strategic and change the way we're responding to regulatory. On Saturday, we approved a project that is taking a Class B or Class C, I forget which, building in Clarendon and turning it into a residential 309 units. We have to do that. Class B and Class C buildings are not, the world has changed. People are going to work from home. And if you're a great office building or you're at risk. And we have to, as a board, we have to be courageous about making decisions that shift. Office to residential conversions are not the answer in most cases because of the way they're built. But we have to have courage when we need it, because it is a race economically, and we want to win it for Arlington. That's just the way. I'll give an example, less popular, and we got beat up about it. Hotel Pentagon. Joe, you mentioned, mad at me for that. That's okay. There are 2 dilapidated hotels, and we made a hard decision for an economic piece that is going to integrate economically a neighborhood, Green Valley, that has historically not. It was a hard decision, perhaps the hardest vote that I've cast. But I believe that we can't, if you look at the facts in detail of that situation, it was the sort of economic courage that we need in order to be able to invest in affordable housing and a housing grants program. That's just an example. And then last, Mark is exactly right. I'm not here to tell you, it's like people say, housing is a human right. Well, what do you mean by that? Single family housing, I wish was a human right, but it ain't. But not having homeless folks should be a human right. And so on the state, they shouldn't help every Arlingtonian, but we should have an unemployment program and a safety net program so that those who have been dislocated economically in Arlington over time are helped. Those most in need in Arlington over the next year should be helped. And we are sitting on a $5 billion surplus in Richmond, and this governor won't sign a penny to help those most in need. We got to vote, and we got to vote for someone who doesn't talk just about bipartisanship, but actually delivers caring for people, not abstract stuff. So that's a big choice. And when we have a new governor and with our new legislature, they will have to do something to help, because otherwise it's not just about, we are the economic engine. So you have to have a safety net, or Bristol, Virginia and its suburbs are going to be struggling even more than they are now. So those are a few economic, sort of related economic thoughts, and I hope it's okay.
Yeah, no, if I could.
Sure.
There's one other, and this is a challenge to the way we do government at the local level. I read a report recently from Rand, just really very short. It's only like 3 or 4 pages or whatever. And what it was doing was saying, how come it costs so much more money to build multifamily housing in California versus Texas? Trust me, I'm from Texas. I was there last weekend. It's not a paragon of virtue. Trust me, it's not. But one of the things that it just struck me, you read these little reports in passing and just 1 or 2 things stick out. And one of the things that we're talking about is how quickly you get to a decision for a developer once they make an application. And like what they did with some of these conversions, Arlington is moving really quickly. This region as a whole does not do that quickly. There is a tradition of a lot of public input over a long period of time from everybody. You guys have taken it to a new spectator sport level, right? They have the deal, and I can tell you it's not every jurisdiction, but I say this number and people are shocked at it. There are many jurisdictions in Texas where the standard is, if the developer hasn't had a decision in 60 days, the answer is yes. When we have by rights processes that take 18 months to 2 years to do, that means that the holding cost, particularly at interest rates now, are just skyrocketing. And you think, well, that's just the rich developers. No, that's why our housing is so expensive here to build, in part. We can't fix it all, but we have got to do a better job of managing, not saying we have to get rid of zoning, not that we have to get rid of anything. We just have to manage the process a lot better than what we do now and help that. And we are never going to make our housing more affordable by doing one thing. We're going to have to take 100 small bites out of that apple.
Thank you. I want to take a moment to see if there's any questions from the audience. Come to you. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Let me bring the mic to you.
So the question was raised, or the speculation was raised, just how many people have been laid off? And I've been curious about that question myself. And so I actually used AI. I used Copilot. Copilot said it cannot give local statistics, but it projects 12% of the workforce being cut nationwide. So if you multiply 12% times Arlington's employment base federal workforce, which I believe was in the latest profile, the 2023 profile was listed as 28,000 people. So that would be over 3,000 people have been laid off.
Simply, we don't know yet, because what has happened in this, and I think I should wear your mind.
Yeah.
Right? I'm used to teacher voice, there's no problem. No, we just don't know, because in part, they announced these others, then we had court decisions that stopped. That stopped that action, at least temporarily, right? So we don't know what's gonna be, and I was a part of a group that actually submitted a FOIA request to OPM for information and data on this kind of stuff. And they gave us this god awful, huge data dump that really didn't tell us much of anything new. I'm shocked, right? I'm sitting here beside myself, so shocked. But the point is that we don't know what the effect of that's gonna be. What I do know is that Joni Ernst in the Senate in January filed a bill that, if passed, would mandate that federal agencies in this region relocate 30% of their workforce. The only one that we've had announced since then, because the agencies have already been, their deadline is passed about submitting their plan. Agriculture Department announced that they were going to lay off 10%, which would be about 1,200 workers locally in the region. And they were going to relocate most of the rest. Now, I don't know how to quantify most, but that's part of our challenge that we have now, is that we have this, and you know what we have that's really starting to hurt our economy, like we see with the other, it's surely the uncertainty. Because you think about these households. Now, if I've been in the federal government for 30 years, I'm eligible to retire, maybe I can get out, and do that. But you think about these folks that just don't know from day to day. In fact, they have the one that they have to check their email every Friday to see if they've been fired. What is their natural reaction? Well, we got to pull back on spending. We're not going to go to the restaurant. We're going to fix meals in. We're going to do Kraft macaroni and cheese out of the dry box instead of the deluxe version. They're going to make those cuts, but unfortunately, all of that then will spill over into the sales tax revenues and the jobs for all of those workers. So this is the thing, that it's the uncertain. I wish I knew what the number is, because if I knew the number, I'd know how much to tell the state they need to put into the program.
So this is our lightning round, because one thing we like to do is be timely here. Quick question, 10 seconds to answer it. If you had one underutilized opportunity for cross-sector collaboration to ensure the stability of Arlington's economy, what would it be and who would lead it?
It's an existing program called Go Virginia that is funded with about $10 million. That is the most underutilized economic development program in Virginia. We're working to fix that. And I think if we do that, it's going to help our region. And I'm happy to stay after to tell you more about it.
You can't pick that one.
Well, I do have 2 pending projects that are specifically about what do we do with the problem that are pending from Go Virginia. But they're telling me that we're out of cycle, so it'll be months before it gets considered. So in any case, I think the real thing is we have to have an intentional talent attraction program that is working very diligently to convince that even if we do lose all these jobs, we're still going to be a great place to be. And if we lose those young people who for generations have been coming to this region, if they quit coming, the rest of it's off the table. Ryan's not going to be able to attract many companies if we have massive outflows of population. So that's what we got.
It's a tough question. I mean, it may sound gratuitous, but push us on the specifics of the federal response. if we capture the persistence, and I may regret saying this, but if we capture the persistence and civility of John Weistad, we may come to solutions that we need. Because I believe in that civic dialogue, and I believe in pushing us in community forums to develop specifics like this. And that's the best hope I've got, because we're at the start of the challenge. The challenge doesn't go on forever. The damage we will know by the midterm elections. We will know what the damage is in 2026, because there will be a response. But until that moment, we have to follow the facts, because this round of this terrible president isn't the last round. And there's pain that we're seeing. If we are civil and persistent, I think we can develop economic solutions that experts and great people like Brian and Mark and the board coming along can actually help us.
Thank you. Quickly, I think that from a nonprofit perspective, probably twofold, strengthening public-private partnerships and philanthropy to close revenue diversification and the gap there. And then also strengthening collaboration amongst nonprofits. I'm so grateful that you mentioned AFAC. AFAC is a partner of Homestretch. They were just over at Homestretch just this past week giving us a surplus of food. Why did I say that? One, to thank AFAC for the belief in our mission. But while they were sustaining their mission, they were helping to sustain ours. AFAC provides food, we provide housing, but together we affect change for all those that we serve.
Okay, I waited to bring this up, and I'm afraid it's going to sound insensitive, but we have a huge asset that is untapped. And those are people who used to be federal employees, okay? People who retired a little bit earlier than they wanted to, who are now searching for how to make their days meaningful. Volunteer Arlington, you mentioned the nonprofit sector. There's a huge untapped resource there. I realize a lot of those people are going through pain right now, so it may not be the right time for us to reach out to them and say, let's sign up and see how you can give back to your community. As a matter of fact, I think, but that pool of talent, those are people who committed their lives to giving to the community. If we can get past this trauma, and I don't know how to even express it, anything other than that, I think we have a resource there that could really be used in a really effective way, not just for the community, but for those individuals.
Yeah, can we give our panel a round of applause? Thank you very much. So thank you for a very thoughtful and grounded discussion. We are, what we heard tonight is obviously very clear. We're facing real challenges, but we also have the leadership and talent and community available to resolve them together. So on behalf of Advance Arlington, I want to thank all of our panelists, all of our community members for joining us tonight and joining in the conversation. Matt, we believe in community dialogue as well, and that is the mission of Advance Arlington. I was going to turn it over to Karen Bate, but she said no because of the time. But I will plug one thing. This is the official end of our conversation programming. However, next month we have our soiree. It's our second soiree, and we hope that you will join us there on June 11th. And it will be at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Arlington. Beautiful museum, beautiful host, beautiful event. If you are interested in sponsoring for the event, please see Tony Weaver. And we really thank you for coming out and supporting Advance Arlington all year long. If you are interested in joining our board, please let us know. Go to our website and contact us. Thank you for coming tonight. Have a great evening.